Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the fifth OWEB Water Acquisition Grant Program RAC meeting. Glad to see everybody's face here this morning at what should be our last RAC meeting on this rulemaking. We'll first start with a round of introductions. So we'll start with RAC members first, and I'll call you as I see on the screen, starting with Steve and then Jessica.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Steve Perrette here from your DEQ.
Morning, Steve.
Good morning, Jessica Humphreys with Trout Unlimited.
Thanks, Jessica. Let's go to Corey and then Kate.
Yeah, Corey Kershane, Water Resources. Apologies, I got sick over the weekend, so I have my camera off as well.
Welcome, Corey. Okay. Looks like Kate, you might be having some audio problems. So let's go to Anton and then Kaylin.
Good morning, all. Anton Cuno. I work for the Department of Natural Resources with Umatilla Tribes.
Welcome, Anton.
Good morning, Kaylin Barter. I'm an attorney with Culp & Kelly Law Firm, and I'm here on behalf of Client Environmental Defense Fund.
Great. Thanks, Kaylin. We'll go Shyla and then April.
Hey, good morning. Shyla Olson, District Manager with Wasco County Soil and Water.
Welcome.
Good morning, April Snell, Executive Director with the Oregon Water Resources Congress.
Great. Thanks, April. We'll go back. Kate, we had any luck on the audio?
Yeah, good morning. Kate Fitzpatrick with the Deschutes River Conservancy.
Okay, welcome, Kate. Okay, we have some folks here from the public. You can feel free to introduce yourselves as well. We've got Ken Beerley and then Michael Blankenship.
Ken Beerley, interested party.
Morning, Ken.
Then Michael, if you just unmute yourself, I allowed your mic.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to find I was trying to hit the wrong button there. This is Michael with the County Stormwater Conservation District.
Michael, your audio is really fuzzy, so we didn't get a good introduction from you. Oh, that maybe sounded better. Want to try that again?
Yeah, give me a second here. Computer problem, sorry.
Oh, that's better, actually.
Can you hear me better now?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is Michael Blankenship with the County Stormwater Conservation District.
Okay. Well, let's go to OWEB folks now, starting with Meg.
Hi, folks. My name is Meg Birchfield. I'm a grant support specialist, and I'm here to assist with kind of anything technical in the background. So if you have any problems, just let me know.
Thanks, Meg. Brian?
Good morning, everybody. Brian Walcott, Water Acquisitions and Capacity Grants Coordinator.
Thanks, Brian. Taylor?
Sure. Yeah, Taylor Larson. I'm the coordinator for the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program here at OWEB, and here to help take some notes.
Yep. Thanks, Taylor. And my name is Eric Hartstein. I'm the Senior Policy Coordinator at OWEB. And I'm pinch hitting here for Renee on facilitating this meeting. So by way of the agenda, we'll move next to public comments. We'll have, we have an hour set aside to walk through what we think will be the the final draft of the rules for the RAC. We have an opportunity for a second public comment period. If there's folks that are interested, we'll have a little bit of a discussion around the fiscal and racial equity impacts of the proposed draft rules. And then we will conclude with some next steps after this process. So any questions on the agenda before we get going? All right, so not seeing any. We'll move on to public comment. So we did have 2 written comments that were received by OWEB from Ken Beerley and then Kimberly Priestley from Water Watch. And these were sent out to the RAC members on Friday by Brian. And we've also posted them to OWEB's rulemaking webpage under the 5th RAC meeting for water acquisitions for folks that are interested. And now will also be a time for folks that wish to provide verbal public comment. So if you are interested in providing verbal comments, please raise your Zoom hand and then Meg will unmute you. Okay, great. Thanks, Ken.
You should be all set to unmute, Ken.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't want to belabor the point. I've provided extensive written comments. And while Water Watch has a point that Oregon, nor for that matter, to my knowledge, no other state has a program to legally protect groundwater, that in my mind should not be sufficient reason not to offer the opportunity to provide an incentive to reduce drafting aquifers under specific conditions. And I've not argued that we should use the ACW, the Conserved Water Statute, because as they argue, that could allow expansion of use. I think the crux of their argument is that only through regulation should we conserve groundwater. And I think a similar argument could be made for surface water. The visibility of surface water and the institutional growth of nonprofits around the conservation of surface water is not, in my mind, sufficient reason not to attempt to create incentives for reducing groundwater use. And groundwater withdrawals under confined circumstances, and I think that's really important, confined circumstances, where there can be a clear diminution of the total water withdrawal from an aquifer and a demonstrated benefit to groundwater dependent ecosystems should be an opportunity that would explore the possibilities of creating incentives for acquisition of groundwater to reduce over-allocation that has occurred in many parts of the state. With that, I'll shut up and let you get back to business. I know you've been a very active RAC for some time. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Ken. I appreciate your comments. Okay. Any other verbal comments? Okay, and again, if there is time, we will allow for a second public comment period a little bit later on. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the review and discuss the draft edits to the rules. And I'll turn it over to Taylor for a little bit of screen sharing and then Brian to walk through those draft edits.
Okay, can you all see that? Should I make it a little bigger?
Maybe a little bigger.
How's that?
That looks pretty good.
All right. Well, Taylor, thanks for bringing up the working version of the rules. And what we're hoping to go over in this next hour is there's around 9 changes, just some minor comments that were made at the last RAC meeting, and based on those, there were some adjustments made, and so I wanted to call those out. Some of these have a comment box referring to them, others do not. But the first change is in the purpose statement with the fourth sentence, where it refers to in the event of any conflict between these requirements and others referenced in Oregon Administrative Rules 95005. And there had been a change to that phrase if there is a conflict, but we went back to the original rule language in the event of any conflict between these two. So just a minor adjustment going back to what we had before. And that was the only adjustment to the purpose statement. Then there was some changes in the definition section in section 0020 with sub 11. And this is the definition for water use agreement. And here there were 3 references to water rights, and those have been changed to referencing water use. And then there's also a phrase added at the end intended to address the purpose described in OAR 0010. And that's just tying any water use agreement back to the original purpose of the water acquisition program. And then also there were comments made at the last RAC meeting about the phrase conserve or curtail the water use, and that has been changed to manage, with the justification for that being there was a possibility of confusion with the conserve water program. So we took out the reference to conserve, and then curtail is a word that just has some negative connotations, and we thought we would just change it to a water use agreement being a different way to manage the water that's agreed upon by the water right or the water use holder and another interested party. So any questions on any of those changes so far? Yes, Kaylin?
I have to beg forgiveness for not having reviewed these and proposed changes in advance of the call today. And this one seems a significant change that we had not discussed, or that I don't recall discussing. So where I'm just initially having confusion over the change is that the existing language does have a clear connotation of reducing water use in order to leave more water to apologies for struggling to articulate this. I think maybe just as a threshold issue, it'd be helpful to understand kind of the reasoning behind the change, being that this wasn't one that we had discussed previously. And then second, would welcome a conversation with the RAC around whether managing water gets us to the threshold of the purpose for these rules and the purpose for this program, or if it's actually using less water, which is the intent. And I'll stop talking now.
Well, sure. Thanks for that, Kaylin. And it was Steve that had actually made the comments at the last meeting, just wondering about using the term conserve and curtail, and had suggested replacing those with manage. And another option we could use is we could use the term change or forego. water use. So that's another option. But I was curious to hear, Steve, if you have any further points. You had initiated this with your comments at the last meeting.
Well, I think it's maybe a little bit of semantics. Conserved water, I think you identified kind of the concern with that it might be sort of confused with the conserved water project, which is not a water use agreement. The curtail beneficial use phrase, I just thought made it sound like the goal is reducing beneficial use, when really the goal is environmental benefits, right? And so is that's part of the reason, Kaylin. And but without the phrase conserve water or curtail the beneficial use in there, manage is somewhat vague, right? So I do think it benefits that Brian or somebody added that phrase at the end there, that we're managing water in a way to address the purposes described in 0460010.
Well, in-stream is a type of beneficial use, so just saying that we're curtailing beneficial use is problematic because we're talking about changing the type of beneficial use, not curtailing it.
Yeah.
That doesn't help us get to resolution, but.
Well, that thanks for bringing that back up, Steve. And Anton, I think that's a great point. You know, in-stream use is a beneficial use. So I think maybe we think about how this managing water, because I think you're right, Steve. It is hitting me as a vague.
But the thing about the water use agreements themselves too, right? The contract between parties, it describes the management of water, how the water will be managed under that water use agreement. That's what the water use agreement does. It describes water management. And so I thought that might be an okay word there, but yeah, it's a little vague.
I mean, I would say the water use agreement describes how the water is used. I think if we start going down the road of using managing water, then we've gotten into that quagmire in other conversations, not in this RAC, but around like what is water management?
Well, I could propose again an alternative being a contractual agreement between a holder of a water use subject to transfer and an eligible grant applicant to change or forego use of water under a water use subject to transfer. So that has a little more, just adding in change or forego use of water in place of manage.
Taylor, maybe you're working on this right now, but would there be a chance for you to kind of capture that? Yeah. And Brian, you might need to repeat that.
It would be replace the word manage with change or forego use of. Thanks, Taylor.
How does that sit with RAC members?
I think it works.
I wonder if we need the final part in blue if we've already got the to achieve contractually protected in-stream flow. I can't, I need to open it on my other screen to be able to see both definitions. But if that already references the purposes, then
Caitlin, are you suggesting to delete that last part or move it?
right now I'm not suggesting anything because I can't see what I'm potentially suggesting. Sorry, I'm quickly navigating to the rules page to see what the full definitions is because I can't see the contractually protected in-stream flow on the screen. All right, I pulled it up and I can see it's contractually protected in-stream flow means the amount of water secured through a water use agreement. So that wouldn't seem to get us there without the blue language. So only reason is I was just stumbling over all of the commas in the water use agreement, but I can live with it.
Great, thanks, Caitlin.
And I did want to ask Caitlin, are you saying you're comfortable with the proposed language with manage or with the change or forgo use of?
Good clarification, Brian. I think change or forgo use of is more specific, and I would prefer that language and would welcome other RAC members' perspectives on that.
Thanks.
I would agree. I like change or forgo better than manage, so.
I'm good with that as well.
Couple thumbs up from Steve.
Yeah, same here. I agree with the change or forego use of as well.
Yeah, I think we're pretty close to consensus here, Brian.
Yeah, I think we've heard from most of the RAC members. I don't see any raised hands. Oh, unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to move on down to the eligibility section. (0035). And before we get into the wording here, I just wanted to touch on the groundwater topic that's come up several times throughout this RAC meeting process. And OWEB has decided to take an approach of not including reference or mention to groundwater in the rules. And OWEB has also not decided whether we're going to include a new section with the water acquisition application guidance at this point, including groundwater. We are still having internal discussions at OWEB and anticipate some future discussions with Water Resources Department staff and other partners to get input, as we've heard both sides of the issue, and don't want to rush into this at the moment. And we're not going to try to have anything in place in time for the next grant cycle for water acquisitions, which will begin in August of 2026. So we might be reaching out to some of you or all of you to potentially put together a work group for further discussions, but that's currently the approach that we're taking on this topic. And Eric, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to share or add.
No, I think you covered it well, Brian. See if there's questions or comments from the RAC.
Galen?
Thanks, Brian. I just want to say back to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. So the current approach would be no express language within the rules, open, ongoing conversation of maybe where and how groundwater gets treatment in guidance, and no plans to have language in place in advance of the August solicitation. Is that all? Am I saying that all right back?
Yes, that's correct. Thanks.
And in that case, I guess, I also think I heard you say that the solicitation wouldn't expressly discuss groundwater. But I'm not, is it also that there would not be conversations in advance of August in the event that an applicant does submit a water acquisition proposal? I think it is it's conceivable that OWEB might end up with one of these in its hopper. And so I think it would be, if there is interest and capacity to keep this conversation, to keep some kind of conversation going in advance of August, just to be ready if, given all the interest that we've had from the public and from particularly specific geographies, I think it just would behoove the state to be keeping this front of mind.
Thanks for that comment, Kaylin. And we are going, as an agency, continue to explore this concept, knowing, as you said, there could be an application coming in, and we would need to review that to see if it's going to be eligible and something to consider bringing forward to the technical review team to evaluate. So that, as we continue to learn more and get a better understanding of this and get assistance from others at Water Resources Department and Department of Justice, I think that will help us determine how we might handle that type of an application if we see one.
I think it would also just be useful to do some proactive outreach to organizations that are really focused on groundwater dependent ecosystems, and keep those perspectives in mind as well. So I heard you mention DOJ and Water Resources Department. Certainly would welcome continued coordination with ODF and W, and look forward to continuing to support those conversations wherever we can. Thanks.
Thanks, Kalen. April, I see your hand up.
Thanks. And I think we talked about this at the last meeting, but there's also been a Water Resource Commission meeting in between. And so making sure I'm stating for the record that I do think that this is an issue that merits additional conversation with both agencies. And as I think I've said before in this RAC gathering, we have received public comments that are kind of on both sides of the spectrum. And then similarly with the Water Resources Department's water rights rulemaking, which the commission will be making a decision on here in a few days. That's something that, as I have discussed before this group, this issue came up in the context of the allocation of conserved water program, and the department decided not to make the adjustment there in the rules that are now out related to the Water Resources Department's rulemaking. You will find this topic and kind of similar variations that have come up before us are mirrored in some of the comments that they received. And so don't know what the commission will do with all that, but I do think that as we've stated here and as I've stated before the commission, it's something that does merit more conversation. And I do think that so for the OWEB approach, what you've put together here, I think makes a lot of sense. It gives space for those conversations to occur because I don't think it's a matter of whether it is an eligible use. It's a matter of how, both here and in the ACW program. And it's important that we get it right and not get before maybe some of those conversations that may happen at the Water Resources Department level. But given that this is our last meeting, and I think I've mentioned it before, I don't know how you're going to put the final product together outside of the rules and the required fiscal statement and all that stuff, how you're going to present it to the OWEB board. But I think it would be good to have this as one of the issues that we've talked about as RAC that merits additional conversation. And in the meantime, I think the rules don't say that you can and they don't say you can't. And I think if you guys get an application, that also will help maybe with some of these conversations. So hopefully that made sense. Thank you.
Thanks, April. Yeah, that did make sense. Thanks for kind of summarizing the conversation. Any other comments on this topic? Not seeing any hands raised, so we can move on to the ineligibility in sub 2. There was just a sentence structure changed here to try to make this a clear sentence regarding where the proposed water acquisition project is within the boundaries of an irrigation district. The board will only consider the project if that irrigation district has received written notice of the proposed project. So just a little bit of a sentence structure change, but all the wording is there. Excuse me. Not seeing any comments or issues there. The next topic is sub 3. And here is that section talking about programmatic funding. And there was just a question raised at the end of the sentence where it referred to projects in the same basin or other defined area. And other defined area has been changed to a portion thereof. So it could be a project within that same basin or within a subset of that basin, a portion thereof. Not seeing any comments with that. We can move on to evaluation criteria. 46-0196. And here in I'm sorry, I think I skipped over use of funds, 0185. We did have one change within that. And that was in sub 8. And just replacing water right with the term holders of water use. And also that same portion thereof was added in as a better clarification than other defined area. So just 2 changes in there in that sub 8. And now we can move down to use of funds 0185. And then oh yeah, and this was, oh, I'm sorry, I think I misstated, but yeah, it's here in that use of funds 0185 sub 8 replaced water right with holders of water use and a portion thereof. And then the next section to go to is evaluation criteria 0196. And here, as we're getting into evaluation criteria in sub 2, where we talk about characteristics of a water right that are going to be looked at as part of evaluating an application, the term quantification was added to demonstration of use. So demonstration and quantification of use were added in. And then in sub 2A, and here we're talking about projects that are utilizing Oregon Water Resource Department's allocation of conserved water program. And for those projects, the priority date shall be the same as the original right. So both what's going in stream would have the same date as what's going to continue to be used consumptively out of stream. And then in sub 3C, this is also in reference to allocation of conserved water projects. And here a statement was added at the end of that section stating with a higher percentage of water transferred in stream being preferred. Just to clarify that that's going to be part of the evaluation criteria for a project utilized in allocation of conserved water. And this would be a percentage that's greater than what's in current statute for that program. So just knowing that there could be varying percentages based on how many public dollars are going towards a project, but there's also the option to have a greater percentage up to 100% of the conserved water going in stream. And then for sub 4C, and here at the previous RAC meeting, we had proposed deleting this criteria that addresses state, federal, tribal, aquatic habitat priorities or DEQ water quality plans. And based on comments during the meeting, during the 4th RAC meeting and discussions afterwards, we decided that this criteria is different enough from the flow target mentioned in an earlier criteria that we decided to keep that in as something that the technical review team could use to help evaluate the merits of a project. But those are all the items that were changed or adjusted since the last RAC meeting. And just wanted to open it up and see if there's any any comments or concerns, if people noticed anything with those changes or anything else in the rules that you want to talk about. Not seeing any hands raised. Oh, Kaylin?
Gotcha. I was curious about striking the ODA and ODF priorities.
And you're talking about in the evaluation criteria?
Yeah, it was in sub C, and I just know that those agencies do have, I seem to recall that they do have water quality priorities. So I was just curious, having not pulled up OAR 695 46 196 sub 1, whether those agencies' priorities would be well considered in this section. I'm fine leaving it out. It just
Yes, April?
This isn't my issue per se. I'm just trying to remember the rationale here, and if I'm thinking through this correctly, both ODA and I think ODF, their work on water quality is through MOUs, or at least ODA has an MOU with DEQ about agricultural water quality management. And maybe it's just that if you wanted to look at, well, what are those priorities? Maybe those two agencies don't necessarily be listed there, but I'm not familiar with the forestry one as much. But I think at least that's what my brain is telling me why that deletion would make sense. But I don't have a bone in it one way or another.
And I think the idea here was just that Oregon Department of Environmental Quality has the jurisdiction over water quality management and implementation plans. And so just thought it would be appropriate to have that agency called out. But still, for any Fish and Wildlife Agency priorities there, continue to have Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife or other federal or tribal agency priorities included there. Anton?
This is going back to something we looked at earlier, but could we scroll back to the bit about higher percentage ACW projects are preferred? Is there any reason why we wouldn't just say that projects dedicating a higher percent in stream rank higher?
I think we could say that they might rank higher based on that one criteria, but there's 14 other criteria. And so there could be other circumstances with other criteria that might change a ranking.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we wanted to stay away from that, using the word ranking within an individual criteria.
Other RAC members have any thoughts on that? I completely hear you, Brian. I know we have to balance a bunch of other different criteria.
Yes. Galen?
Yeah, I would me too. I hear that there are many criteria, but I guess what I'm kind of struggling with is the being preferred. Feels like another spot where we could be a bit more precise, and um, haven't worked out in a alternative suggestion yet, but maybe we could crowdsource this brain trust to see if we could find something a bit more precise. I guess another thing to flag would be the comment that is tagged under Renee's name there. That oversimplifies the ACW statute, which requires a minimum of 25% in stream up to 75% in stream if more, basically, lockstep with the amount of public funding that goes into it. So an issue can arise where if the project receives 100% public funding, the ACW statute only requires a minimum of 75% of that water savings to go in stream. I think what we're trying to get is the projects that deliver more than 75% in stream for more than 75% public funding would be kind of elevated in their ranking. And I feel like Anton said it better, but that would be something else to capture there, that the comment isn't actually doesn't state the specificity within the statute.
Yes, Jessica?
Brian, just a clarifying question, I think, about the process. When TAC reviews applications on all of the different criteria you're referring to, with the amount of protected in-stream water being one of the criteria, is it quantitative? Like, are there points assigned in each criteria that then culminate in a score for each transaction? Like, can we get specific in that regard as to how the higher percentage or above this 75% being transferred in stream is preferred? Like, is that a way we could get it being more specific there?
We're currently not using a numerical point system with the technical review team evaluating each criteria.
Yeah. Okay.
And I do feel like if an applicant is working with a water use holder, that they're aware of the allocation of conserved water program and the percentages built into it by statute. But they would also have the understanding that they could encourage the applicant or the holder of the water use to increase an amount going in stream. And that would be seen more favorably as a better use or a greater benefit for any state dollars that are invested into that project, that there's a greater environmental outcome.
Would it help at all then if it said with a higher percentage of water transferred in stream than required by the ACW program? being preferred?
Yes, that's
It
a
might
good,
just be clearer that there's that certain amount that's required by the program, and then if there's more, that's where that preferential or preference might play in.
yeah, I think that's a good improvement.
But you're right, yeah, that like applicants and the landowners, like we're aware of that, but just making it clearer in rule, like there's a certain amount we have to, if we're willing to give more, that's going to look better when trying to or when proposing a project for and utilizing public funding.
Mm-hmm.
So could we restate that language real quick?
So I think it would be in the amount of, let's see, amount of water that will be protected in stream with a higher percentage of water transferred in stream than required by the allocation of conserved water program being preferred, or I don't know if we want to stick with preferred, but whatever language would be there. So percentage of water transferred in stream with a higher percentage of water transferred in stream than required by the ACW program being preferred was the direction I was going, I guess.
Something like that.
Yes, I think you captured it, Taylor. Thanks.
Okay.
Do we need then the highlighted language? The amount of conserved water over the required percentage?
I think so, because earlier in the sentence, it's talking about both the evaluation criteria looking at the project cost relative to the amount of water going in stream and the amount of conserved water over the required percentage that'll be protected in stream, with a higher percentage of water transferred in stream than required by the ACW program
Okay,
being preferred.
gotcha.
Yes, April?
Well, now that we're wordsmithing as we go, which is less than ideal, I agree with where we're going. I just think that adding more words makes it worse, or at least is not more clear. So I'll try and give a shot here. If the project is utilizing the Oregon Water Resources Department's allocation of conserved water program or other department administered in-stream flow water conservation program, the project cost relative to the amount of water that will be protected in stream with a preference for with a preference for conserved water greater than what is required, or something along those lines. As I think the first part is good all the way up until the project cost relative to the amount of water, because that's one of the components of the evaluation. We just need to express that there's also a preference for putting more than what is required, whether that's a percentage or not. But I think we're really close.
Brian, you muted.
Yeah, April, I think that was a good suggestion. I think that said what we're trying to get at using less words and less repetitive. Galen?
I was gonna say I really like April's suggestion, and it does strike that highlighted red part, and moves it to the end, and changes it to with a preference for, and then works in Jessica's proposed change. I think if we can type that out, and I think we're all going to look at it and be like, yeah, that's the one.
Do you want me to try and capture it right here, Brian?
That would be great, Taylor. I think it starts with and preference for. And I'll let April take it from there.
With a preference for projects with a higher percentage of water transferred in stream than what is required.
Just for projects with something like that.
I think each time we take a stab at it, we vary it just slightly, but maybe that means we're gonna get it all right. Close enough.
And I think I was incorrect when I said and preference for. I believe it's with preference for. Thanks, Taylor.
Yep.
I'm comfortable with that adjustment, and I'm just curious to see if there's anyone that has any concerns. Not seeing any. We'll go with that adjusted wording for that criteria item. And I'm curious now to see if there are any other topics or items that anyone wants to go over as we are getting close to wrapping up this review of the working version of the rules.
Yeah, hi, Brian.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I just, in Kimberly Priestley's most recent comments, one of her concerns was that we were striking under evaluation criteria, that we were striking the sentence that says target water rights of adequate seniority to ensure reliability of wet water in stream and all water year conditions. And I believe the reason we struck that is because the next sentence, sub 2 there, includes more qualities of a water right that we would be evaluating to ensure that we have a reliable water right. So I just wanted to point that out for the record here, that was, I believe that was the intent of the RAC, and we were actually making that change to strengthen the reliability of the water right.
Thanks for bringing that up, Steve. I think you're correct that, yeah, we thought if we had a little more detail on what characteristics of a water right we're looking at, that would help to evaluate whether a water right's going to hold up in a typical year as it's transferred, or leased in stream or through a water use agreement, but also look at it in relation to drier conditions or bad water years. And I think the challenge with using the terms a dry year or a drought year, that's just very subjective.
Mhm.
And trying to determine what those are. Any other comments or questions on that topic or any others? I'm not seeing any, although I'm giving people a chance to just glance back through the set of rules before I turn it over to Eric to take us on to the next section of the agenda. Okay. All right, well, Eric, I'm not seeing any other comments, so if you can take us on to the next topic.
Great. Yeah, will do. Thanks, Brian. And so we are quite a bit ahead of schedule, which I think is great. So we'll move on to the fiscal and racial equity impacts discussion. And then I think we'll follow up with a second public comment period. So starting with the fiscal and economic impact of the proposed rules, when we file a notice for rulemaking with the Secretary of State's office, we are asked about the fiscal and economic impact of the proposed rules. And in particular, we're asked about the cost of compliance for state agencies, local governments, and members of the public, if they may be economically affected by the proposed rules. And we think that these considerations mostly apply when it comes to regulatory agencies and probably much less likely to apply for non-regulatory voluntary grant programs. And we don't see a cost of compliance, but we did want to check with the RAC to see if there are any additional considerations that we should take into account when it comes to cost of compliance with these draft rules. So stop and see if there's any thoughts on this one. Okay, not seeing any. In addition, when we do file that notice for rulemaking, we're asked about the effects of the proposed rules on small businesses. And small businesses are not eligible for most OWEB grants, but OWEB grantees often do work with small businesses in the course of their grants. And so we thought RAC members might have some perspectives on if the proposed rule revisions would have a negative impact on any of the contractors, consultants that you work with. And I'll stop and see if there's any thoughts on this one. Okay, not seeing anything. Can move on to the statement identifying how the adoption of the rules will affect racial equity in the state. So as we're asked when we're providing the notification to provide a statement identifying how adoption of the rules will affect racial equity in Oregon. And we do not anticipate that revisions to the Water Acquisition Grant Program rules will affect racial equity, but do want to make sure to get any considerations from the RAC on this topic. Not seeing anything. Appreciate you thinking about both these topics, and we'll move on to our second public comment period. So for folks that are on, and I think it's just Ken, we still have Michael. If you'd like to provide a second public comment, please raise your team's hand, and I see Ken already has his up. So take it away, Ken.
Thank you. I really appreciate the thoughtful deliberation that the RAC has provided. Keeping open the idea of considering groundwater in the future, I think, is wise. I would suggest that you also engage the Nature Conservancy, who's done a great deal of work on groundwater dependent ecosystems. But I also would like to make sure that you're aware that there's a rough analog to Oregon's Conserved Water Rights Act, but more similar to a contractually protected in-stream flow, which is called a voluntary agreement. It's a statutory requirement or statutory provision that's been in state water law since 1955. While the Conserved Water Act has both a history and detailed rules around it, voluntary agreements have been around longer, but have no rules and has not been used. But it does create the same kind of opportunity that that something like a protected in-stream flow agreement provides, because if there is an adopted voluntary agreement, that is a contractual arrangement to reduce groundwater use, and acquisition of groundwater rights could be a piece of that in the future. So it's something to consider. It is an existing statute. It isn't talked about much. Well, it's starting to be talked about, but I think it's something to be aware of. But thank you for your consideration. I think that I've been impressed with the thoughtfulness of the RAC, and they really think that the rules that you've developed are going to be very useful for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Really appreciate your comments. Okay, other public comment at this time? And not seeing any. We can go on, I think, to the next steps, which are right now our plan is to update the OWEB board on the RAC process at their April 28th, 29th meeting, which is in Canyonville at the Seven Feathers Casino. And it will be an informational item at the meeting, and plan on discussing some of the key themes that were brought up during these RAC meetings. Staff will not be asking for a decision from the board at that meeting, but maybe getting an indication on how the board is feeling on the direction taken by the RAC. Just after that, in early May, we expect to file a notice with the draft rules with the Secretary of State's office, and also provide notice to tribes, our GovDelivery mailing list, and legislators. So we'll have that whole month of May open for tribal and public written comment, and we'll also have a hearing to receive verbal comments as well. And in early June, we'll review all the comments that were received and provide a response to each comment, including if that comment resulted in a change to the draft rules. And we'll be sure to send kind of that final draft of the rules to the RAC for awareness purposes. And then finally, we'll bring that final draft version to the full OWEB board at their meeting in Hood River in July. That's July 28th and 29th, I believe, for consideration of adopting the draft rules. So we don't expect the need to reconvene the RAC at this point, but if we do hear that if the OWEB board wants to go in a different direction with the rules, either in April or July, there's maybe an outside chance that we might be reaching out again for a sixth RAC meeting. But again, pretty unlikely, we think. So we'll stop there, see if there's any questions on kind of next steps. Yeah, April, go ahead.
No questions. I just wanted to make sure that I expressed my appreciation to you, Eric and Brian. Renee, hope she feels better, and the other OWEB staff that have assisted us throughout the process. I feel as a RAC member, you've been very responsive to concerns. Hasn't felt like it's been a rushed process, and you may or may not know that's not always the case with other rulemakings. So just really want to express appreciation for the time you guys have spent on this, and we'll likely provide comments on the final product, but just really appreciate the thoughtfulness of the staff, and to other RAC members. I feel like we've engaged well, and I apologize for missing some meetings, but was able to follow up, and felt like I was able to catch up on what I missed when I was on the road there. So just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you, April. That means a lot, and kind of right back at you. I mean, we really want to say thanks to everybody on the RAC for all the time and effort you put into all these meetings and the time in between. We truly could not do this without you. So you have our deepest gratitude for helping out with this. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, Eric, I just wanted to clarify one thing that you said in the next steps, and the July board meeting is actually going to be in the Dalles rather than Hood River. And just wanted to clarify that minor point.
Great, thank you. Yeah, a little bit farther east. Thanks for that clarification. Okay. There's no other questions or comments. Like we said, Brian, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just also wanted to thank the RAC for their time they took to go through what's a bit of a tedious process to go over the nitpicking details of these rules, but it's very important that we get them right. And it's really important to have thoughtful feedback from the community of folks that track water issues around the state. And I just appreciate everyone's time and input in this process.
Okay. Well, folks, so we'll keep you updated on the status of the final draft rules as they work their way through the process, and of course on any plans with the groundwater topic. And I guess with that, again, thank you for your time, and hope you enjoy the sun this week.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you all.
all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
Thank you.
See you in 5 years.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, folks.